Hey guys, it's lividfray. Welcome back to another episode of Just the Good Stuff, where I show you only the good stuff from the vendor restocks this week. As usual, I like to start off inside the terminal as long as this vendor has anything good, and this week we do have a 2% pulse critical hit chance mod. I say this pretty much every week, but I will say it again. These are very reliable to be picking up. In the off chance that you do decide that you need them, it's very inconvenient to not have them. So I would just recommend stocking up on these while they are obviously in the shop on the maximum percentage rolls. And when you're done here, make sure to head over to the Base of Operations Advanced Weaponry vendor. This vendor does have an SVD for sale this week that's really good for sentry builds. It does have Brutal, Accurate, and Disciplined. I'm personally picking up one of these. I'm going to try it with my Sentry build. I'm going to roll off Disciplined for something else, more than likely Ferocious, or you could even roll Cool-Headed here, and it would be very beneficial for a Sentry build. The next vendor we're visiting here in the base is the Gear vendor. This vendor has an Electronics gear mod on Health. Now, this is a bit of an odd mix, but the rolls themselves are actually really high, so for whatever reason, if you need electronics mods on Health, these are very, very good to be picking up this week. Our next stop is going to be over in Camp Clinton. This vendor does have a firearms gear mod on 2.5% EDR. The rolls are very good, and these mods are really good for combating predator users. It's going to help you withstand that bleed effect, and it's also going to help you against grenades. So I would definitely pick these up for PvP related content. I would not recommend using these in PvE, but if you're using them against other players, they are very, very good to be using. The next stop we're going to head to is Dante's Run. This is very, very close to Camp Clinton, and this vendor does have our one and only Damage to Elite mod for sale this week at 199 stamina and 3% damage to elites. Again, not the highest numbers. We aren't always going to be lucky with the 4% ones. Those are pretty rare to get, but 3% damage to elites on almost 200 stamina is pretty decent for a damage to elite mod. So I'm actually going to pick these up because I'm going to replace the ones that I have that are lower, and I also need some of these on my other characters. Our next stop is going to be the Cavern Safe House. This vendor does have a maxed out 7.5% support station range mod. Definitely recommend picking these up for your Reclaimer builds if you're not using 5% healing speed, or if you're mix and matching them and doing range and healing speed. Would definitely recommend picking these up while we have the best percentages available. Our next safe room is going to be Madison's Stand. This vendor has a really good electronics mod rolled to skill power. I'm actually going to pick a couple of these up for my third character. Would definitely recommend using these if you are using a tactician build that's not dedicated towards damage to elites, or if you're using this for Reclaimer. These are also really good to be using for that. And the last light zone safe house we're going to be visiting is the Last Call. This vendor has a maxed out 19% small grip available. These are perfect for any of your SMGs, as well as your Predator builds, putting these on for the extra crit hit damage. Now that we're done with the light zone safe houses, we're going to be visiting the dark zone, starting off as usual in the DZ 5th Avenue, as long as there's something good. And there is the absolute cherry on top this week for sale at this vendor. They have a custom M44 sniper rifle with talented and competent rolled on the top, unforgiving on the bottom. These are god roll for your tactician builds. So for the bottom slot, you could do something like Determined, or you could do Cool-Headed. Cool-Headed is actually recommended here. You're going to keep your skills constantly on that cooldown reduction. I actually picked up 3 of these, so you'll see that I absolutely drained all of my Dark Zone credits. I will need to farm these back later. It is very expensive, but I would at least recommend getting 1 for your main character, because these are god roll for your tactician builds or your Reclaimer builds, anything of the sorts where you have 10k electronics involved. I'm actually going to put these on all 3 of my characters that I actively use. Our next checkpoint is going to be West 31st Street. This is still within Dark Zone 1. This vendor does have a 5% pulse duration mod. The checkpoint in Dark Zone 6 also has a 5% pulse duration, but the reason why I'm visiting this vendor instead is because there's also an extended magazine for sale here that's over 120% magazine size. I figured I would just kill 2 birds with 1 stone instead and just bring you guys here. The other vendor does have that 5% pulse duration mod in DZ6, but this vendor instead has 2 good items that I would recommend, and I believe the mods are the exact same price. So I would just recommend visiting Dark Zone 1 instead. Our next vendor that we're going to be visiting is actually a Dark Zone safe room, and it's going to be located in DZ03. This vendor has a lightweight M4 for sale that's really, really good for Alpha Bridge builds because it has responsive on the top, and the bottom slot that is free is actually going to be Fierce. Fierce I don't typically recommend, but considering it is technically 5% more critical hit chance, I would actually recommend a gun like this for Alpha Bridge. You could utilize the final slot on whatever other weapon you would like, as long as it's of the same type, so it would have to be an assault rifle. and you could just change this middle talent to whatever else you would like to. Very, very good for PvP, I would say. It's very, very good for Alpha Bridge as well. The next vendor that we're visiting is West 46th Street in DZ05. This vendor has a 4% turret damage mod. I would recommend these for your Firecrest builds as well as your Tactician builds if you're utilizing the turret. Our next safe room that we're actually going to be visiting is Park Avenue, which is located in DZ08. It's the most south checkpoint in Dark Zone 8. This vendor has another one that I would recommend for Alpha Bridge, and it's actually a Police M4. This weapon has Responsive Again rolled on the top as well as Competent on the top, which is why I would recommend this with Alpha Bridge instead, because you can keep the Competent unlocked as long as you're using a 4-piece Alpha Bridge. You could use this with Predator with a Ninja Bike bag, for example, or you could use a 5-piece Alpha Bridge with the Savage Gloves, or 6-piece if you would really like to, but I personally don't like to run 6-piece Alpha. But you could instead roll the bottom slot over to something like Vicious or Unforgiving. This would work very, very well in PvP, as well as the Deadly Weapon talent. You could technically run the Lightweight M4 that's for sale in DZ03 with the Police M4 as a primary and secondary, and they would share their free talents with each other. So if you have the Dark Zone credits to spare and you're looking for some good guns for PvP, both of these are good options this week with Alpha Bridge. And finally, our last vendor we're going to be visiting inside the Dark Zone is in DZ09 Safe Room. This vendor does have a God-rolled hollowed sight for sale. Apparently, these hollow sights, unbeknownst to me until very recently, can actually go up to 8.5%, but I have never seen anything higher than 7.5 on a sight. I can confirm that the Tyrant Suppressor goes up to at least 8%, but supposedly it goes up to 8.5. Let me know if you guys have any of these God-rolled sights, because I'm very, very curious. But if you are looking for something that's actually technically God-rolled, it's supposed to supposedly be 1% off. This is perfect to be picking up. I personally use the hollow sight for almost all of my ARs. I think that the hollow sights look really, really clean, and they do add that critical hit chance. This one is God rolled with critical hit chance, damage, and headshot. So as soon as I get enough of the Dark Zone credits, I'm actually going to be picking up a couple of these to replace the ones that I do have that are not set to these rolls. So that's going to wrap up the list of items that I would recommend purchasing this week, but I am going to be visiting the blueprints as usual. And again, thank you to AWP for providing me the footage of the items that I would recommend, because I do own these blueprints already. I'm not able to show you on mine, but he has been gracious enough to show me the items that I would like to recommend this week. So starting off right here inside the terminal, we're gonna go to the Firearms Backpack Blueprint. I like to recommend these, especially if you guys don't have classified gear yet. Just craft the firearms, and we have the Stamina Backpack for sale as well. You can do specialized backpacks, are really good. And we also have the Heavy Magazine Spring Blueprint. This is actually for rate of fire. I like to recommend these on the MG5s, as well as the High Velocity Magazine Blueprint. This is also a critical hit chance mag, very good for MG5s, as well as anything involving Predator. We do have the Firearms Gear Mod Blueprint. If you don't see any mods for sale from the vendors that are suited to your build, just buy these blueprints and craft your own mods. We've also been graced with the Performance Gear Mod Blueprint as well, so make sure to pick this up if there are no vendors selling the mods that you actually need for your builds right now. Heading over to Camp Clinton now, we're going to check out the blueprint vendor here. And for starters, this blueprint vendor has the Navy MP5N blueprint. I like to recommend this if you don't have the house yet. It's a very reliable SMG to be using. We also have the Firearms Vest for sale. This is really good for your Vigorous chest piece for PvP, or your Reckless chest piece for your Deadeye builds, for example. We also have the small laser pointer. This is really good for accuracy attachments. We also have the compensator for stability. We have the Firearms Gear Mod for sale over here, as well as the Stamina Gear Mod blueprint too. So we have been graced with the Firearms, Stamina, and Performance Mod blueprints this week. We've only missed out on electronics. But that is going to wrap up this week's episode of Just the Good Stuff. Honestly, this week was pretty packed full of really good items to be picking up. It's not very common that we get like really god-rolled items, such as that custom M44. I would definitely recommend picking up that sniper rifle for your guys' skill builds. We also got some pretty good weapons in general and some pretty good mods. I'm actually pretty happy with this week's reset. I actually picked up the majority of the items that were for sale this week. So let me know what you guys think. Really curious to know if you guys have any of those god roll mods that I was talking about earlier of the 8.5% critical hit chance. Let me know if that's something that you guys have, or if that's something that you've never seen before. I'm really curious to know what your guys' standing is with that. But if you didn't have anything this week that you enjoyed, there is always next week. But I will talk to you guys in the next video. Have a great rest of your day.